I believe that one of the best skills that we can be teaching everyone on this planet is how to get more in tune with what's happening in my nervous system in any given moment. How can I start to identify what state I'm in or where I'm going? And then how can I make decisions throughout my days that really align with that?
What if the key to transformation lies in shifting your perspective? Hi, I'm Dr. Payal Beri. Welcome to Reframing Perspectives. Every conversation here is about one thing: how empathy changes the way we lead, connect, and create impact. Each episode, we get to explore deep, authentic conversations designed to expand your mindset. Whether you're looking to transform your leadership, deepen your relationships within your circle, your community, and friends, or gain clarity in your own personal growth, each episode will inspire you to see things differently and take action. If you're ready to challenge your thinking and embrace transformation, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. A few years ago, I was absolutely restless. My mind was constantly overthinking. I was having a hard time sleeping. And I tried to use my own coping strategies from being a former clinical therapist and knowing typically how I could actually help myself release some of that anxiety. But this time it was different and nothing was working. And then someone said something to me so profound. They shared that our bodies are actually what are supposed to be in motion, physically moving, and our minds are meant to be still. But we've created a world where our minds are running and rushing and we're constantly thinking and our bodies are sitting still. And that transformed everything that I thought about. And I realized the power of nervous system healing and that we've spent so much time intellectualizing our feelings and thinking and emotions instead of allowing our body to actually process what we've been storing inside for so long and that prevents us from moving forward. And that's what Cait and I talk about today: the power of nervous system healing, especially for those of you who are doing work that is so powerful and such a important part of transforming this world. You're a change maker, you're compelled to making a difference. The work that you do requires so much emotion on top of what you personally experience and go through. And so today's episode is really special for all of us to think through all of those feelings that come up, the triggers that happen, and why we can't push through certain scenarios, circumstances in our life, relationships. But if we applied nervous system healing, we could transform everything that we know today. Oh my gosh, Cait, I am so excited to talk to you. Obviously, having personally worked with you and just now it's been like 3 years of knowing you, this is just such a great moment to have you on. And you've been such an integral part of just reshifting. What I will say is that, having come from a mental health background myself, where mindset is the core focus, cognitive, reframing your brain, reframing your behaviors, right? But there isn't that much conversation around your nervous system, and that's something that's still relatively new,
Mhm.
even in, this, like, mental health world. But separately, it's like, I will say as a former clinical therapist, yeah, there's so much focused on our brain and our mind, and I think this is just very true about, like, Western practices in general, that there's this, like, disconnect between our brain and our body. But what you bring to the table and what I've learned so much from you, and now I've just, like, really embodied it, is about just how your nervous system is actually the core that needs to be worked on. So I'm just really excited to, like, dive in and, like, first hear your story about, you were in sales, you were in the banking industry and everything, and what did you hold so fundamentally that is so different than the Cait that we know today?
Yeah, well, thank you first and foremost, Pyle, for having me here. I'm so excited. I know this podcast has been years in the making in terms of your background and the passion and calling that you've had to start this and build this community. So I'm just so proud and excited for you and just honored to be here today. So thank you for having me.
Yes.
Oh, gosh, yeah. The first thing that comes to mind when you ask that question is a very unconscious belief that was ingrained in me really since birth and perhaps even prior to that in terms of intergenerational patterns is the belief that my worth was attached to what I was achieving and producing. So that started from a really young age when I started as a competitive figure skater and dancer when I was like 5 years old. So really,
Wow.
really young. And in those sports, it's very individualized. It's not a team sport. It's, a 2 to 3 minute program where it's kind of about perfection, like landing all your jumps,
Yeah.
executing all your spins, and then you're also you're literally judged. They call them judges. There's a panel of judges that judge you on this technical score, like did you land these technical skills, but also on this artistic element, like how did you show up? And I'm so grateful for the experiences and the opportunity that I had to participate in those sports and in those activities. And it was something I did throughout all of childhood into high school and even into college. So it was such a part of my way of being that I was going out and getting judged on my performance in so many ways. And then I ended up choosing a career in the financial and banking world that led me to be in a sales position after college. So the first roughly 10 years of my professional career were then about, performing and being kind of quote unquote judged and measured based on what I was producing from a revenue perspective. So that was
Wow.
like all my brain and body knew for so many years up until age 28 that it wasn't even something that I was even fully conscious or aware of. It was just how I lived my life.
Wow. To think about that, right? That like, and we're definitely going to dive into intergenerational because I think that is just such a powerful part that, it's talked about, but not talked about in length. And there's so much about that. But before we dive into that, I think that acknowledging the fact that you started at such a young age around competitiveness, perfectionism, and what those like belief systems just get ingrained in, right? That if I don't do it to this level of excellence, then everything is wiped out. And it's just becomes this all or nothing thinking. And to dive even deeper is that it's like the society and the community and the world that we live in, how much of that dictates the way that we then perform in it, right? Like, we live in the US. US is very capitalistic, and so, like, how those thinkings and even your performance in dance, in figure skating, all of that just ties back to this idea of, like, winning.
Yes. Being the best. I mean, that's how literally you're like, I would remember after skating, again, 2 to 3 minutes, not a long time when you think about other sports where it's like 60 minutes, 90 minutes, a couple hours that you're going back and forth where you have kind of an opportunity to bounce back. It's like in 2 to 3 minutes, you're either executing or you're not in the way that these judges that are judging you want you to execute. And then after everyone in your group does their performance, they literally bring a piece of paper that has rankings, like who was first, who was second, all the way to the end. And the whole, like the goal of it is to literally be first, like get the gold medal. And even though I had amazing parents, my mom and dad were always very good about checking in with me. Like, are you enjoying this? Is this something you're having fun with? And my parents and I talk about it, especially my mom and I to this day. Like anytime that they would sense that maybe it was getting to be too much for me, they would like check in with me, like, you don't have to do this. This isn't a job. This is supposed to be fun. And yet, even though they were encouraging me to have fun with it, I took it so seriously. And I think a big part of that was my relationship with my grandma, my mom's mom, who was very much that like, be the best, like 100% is not even good enough. Like you always have to be shooting over the moon. And I was really close with her. And so even though I had my parents, my primary caretakers that were supporting me and encouraging me to like relax and have fun with it, there was this other input that my system was being fed that was basically like when I perform and I do well, grandma is so happy and she's so excited and I feel so connected to her. And, she would buy us gifts and there was all this love and attention and celebration when I was really good in it because it did come pretty easily to me, like it was just something I was naturally gifted and talented at. It kind of like fed that cycle. So it's yeah, it's so interesting how our brains and nervous systems, especially in those formative years, like ages 0 through 7, we're like a sponge, and anything that's happening in our environment is really dictating how we're responding and the beliefs that then we're cultivating and forming as a result of that.
Wow. When you're speaking, I'm hearing so much of like from a young age, that idea of like scarcity being placed in, right? Like with your grandmother, like even 100% isn't good enough. And yeah, right. Like when we think about our parents are our, primary caretakers, but there's a lot of research that shows how the relationship between a grandparent and a grandchild actually plays a really big role in their happiness and, purpose. And there's a lot that shows that. And, similarly, I had that relationship with my mom's mom. RK is named after her, but definitely it's like you see them, it's almost you put them on a pedestal because they're not the ones who are disciplining you. They're not doing any of those pieces. But talk to me a little bit about that model, that scarcity of like, and especially because you were in a sport that wasn't a team sport. And then you go into a career that isn't necessarily a team career sport. Like, I mean, you have a team that you're working with, but really it's like who's the best within that too, right? And so in sales, it's very much like number 1, number 2, like keep going. And so tell me about like what you've learned with having that belief system. Like, what did that do to you? What did that create in you of all of these ingrained beliefs? Like, what do you think it did to your system to get you to a point where you ultimately had massive burnout?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question, Pyle. Such an amazing question that, yeah, I think we can all be asking ourselves, like the environments that we're in, the people that we're surrounding ourselves, like what impact does that have on our system, particularly our nervous system? When I think back and reflect, it's so clear to me today. What wasn't clear to me back then was that I was chronically living in what we call in the nervous system space that sympathetic state. So, more
Mhm.
commonly referred to as fight or flight, but ultimately characterized by this need to mobilize and take action and do and execute and be, yeah, the best, to be competitive. Those are all can all be characteristics of living in that state. And ultimately, as humans, we are not wired to live in that state. We're designed to go into that state for 20, 30, 60 minutes at a time and then recover and move back into what we call our ventral state, which is our growth state where we feel safe to be ourselves, to be authentic, to be fully present. And we're not in that hyper urgent take action mode. So after years and years of being in that hyper action, do, go, urgent kind of zone, that wears on all of your systems from a health perspective, from a relational perspective, from a spiritual, mental, emotional perspective, like across the board. And so our brains and bodies are only designed to be in that state for so long before something has to give. So for me, my burnout experience really manifested as this chronic health condition slash what I call spiritual awakening. And it was 100% my body trying to get my attention. It was like, okay, she doesn't get it. She's not like nothing's changing. So we need to speak up for her. And I always say symptoms that we're having, whether they're physical, mental, emotional, etc., is just our body's way of communicating to us to try to give us information about what we need or don't need or what we need more or less of. So my body in 2016 through this experience I had was really trying to wake me up to the fact that hey, these beliefs and patterns and ways of being and just behavioral patterns that you're moving through are no longer aligned with the future that is destined for you.
Clearly, you got to a point where you actually developed a chronic illness. And I think something that people don't realize is that, to what your point is, that like chronic illnesses, autoimmune research has shown there's a significant tie to emotional trauma, to emotional unresolved issues that you've experienced, whether it's in childhood. And I think a lot of times I think the word trauma does get overused, or people think that like, Okay, what? So now like a little small bump and then as a child is now in a trauma, and it's just like, no, it's not about that. It's about these incremental things that you're just not addressing. And so then it just like adds up and adds up and adds up. And then it's just like your body's just like, okay, that's it. I'm done. And to your point, it's just like, here, now you're gonna have to listen. But in our world that we've created, we then just continue to band-aid that with medications. And we band-aid that with, again, not actual root causes, but with like these quick solutions so that we don't feel the symptoms, but we are not curing the actual cause. But what you did by actually being like, "Okay, something's gotta change here because this can't happen. Like, what is this autoimmune? Like, what is this chronic illness? Holy crap." You actually went into the world of nervous system and somatic healing and started to, like, use that, and you actually reversed it, which is something that you're told over and over again that, there's no cure to these illnesses, you just have to take medication, all of these things. So, how did you I guess, A, find this whole world and what got you because the thing is that there's so many people, and I'm thinking about like change makers, social impact founders, like there's a lot of people who have a lot of chronic illnesses that are out there that are doing great work, but then they're just following that path of like go to the doctor, get a medicine and that's it. So what kind of got you to opening this door versus how other people will just be like whatever, just take the medication. I don't know what this stuff is about.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for asking that question, Pyle. I think it's a couple different things. I think at the very root of why when what was happening to me was happening, from the very first moment, I always had the belief and knowing that like I didn't always have this. Like there's a reason. There is a reason, and I think I'm a natural problem solver. It's for those of you that geek out on human design like I do, it's in my human design chart, like I'm a natural, very curious questioner, problem solver, and I was like, "There's got to be a good reason for this." And so if there's a good reason for it, there's also a really good solution for it. I also
Mm.
was exposed early on in my life to more holistic and kind of functional medicine way of thinking through my dad because of how my grandmother, his mother, how my grandmother was just in terms of food as medicine and just very holistic minded. And so I was exposed to that early enough where my nervous system had a blueprint for, hey, there are alternatives. Whereas for a lot of people, they don't even have the awareness that there are
Right.
alternatives available. So I had that. I also have a strong faith. And so I felt like I was being divinely guided and led through this experience. I mean, not in every moment. There were certainly moments where I was like, what the bleep is going on here? Like, please get me out of this. Like it was I always say the best worst 2-year period, meaning I would never want to relive it in any way, but I know that there was a reason that I was going through it. And so I was always staying connected to I'm being led, I'm being guided, and I just have to trust and I don't know when it's all going to resolve, but I really felt that deep down. So that really allowed me to get through ultimately a 2-year period where I was trying so many different things. Because let's face it, when you do take a root cause approach, it's not usually the straight and narrow path that just takes away the symptoms. Like you're on a road of discomfort, it's nonlinear, there's going to be ups and downs. So I think those things were things that really got me through that. And also just the relationships I had with family members, my parents in particular, and my sister, and just feeling the support from them of like, I'm not alone in this. I think those things definitely allowed me to get to a place where I was able to try different things out and get curious and yeah, just kind of be on this path of like, I don't know how long this is going to take, but I'm going to get better and I'm going to do it without relying on medicine for the rest of my life.
Yeah. So, you brought up something really important where like you had some level of like mapping on this, but there's a lot of people who don't. So, how would you introduce nervous system healing and somatic healing to someone who this is just so foreign to, but yet could be such a life changer for them?
Absolutely, Pyle. It's such a beautiful question and one I get so energized to answer because I always say every human being on this planet could benefit in some way, shape, or form from nervous system work. While for me, it started from a purely health perspective in terms of healing burnout and healing this chronic condition that I had developed. It's so funny to look at my journey because then a few years later, as I was starting my coaching and training company, I realized yet again as I was going out to the world and trying to build a business, which and for anyone that's listening that, I know many of your listeners are founders, are entrepreneurs or entrepreneurial in nature. It takes a lot of capacity and resilience to do those things. So I always say, no matter what your goal is, whether it's a health goal, whether it's a business goal, a leadership goal, or even a relationship goal, all of the patterns and habits and beliefs that we have start with what we call our autonomic nervous system. Autonomic is just another word for automatic. Autonomic meaning, the part of our system that allows us to breathe without having to think about it, allows our heartbeat to go without having to think about all these like different kind of core biological functions. And it's also the place where all of our beliefs, feelings, emotions, and even our thoughts are ultimately a direct reflection of what's happening within our nervous system at any given time. I use this visual a lot with people as if you think about an iceberg, right? There's the top of the iceberg that's, maybe only 5 to 10% of that structure that sits above water. So that's what I think of as like, hey, the results that we have or we don't have at the very tippy top. And then underneath that is our behaviors and habits and maybe the strategies or tactics or things that we're doing on a daily basis. And maybe even our thoughts to some extent, because some of us are, at any given moment aware of some of what we're thinking. But then as you start to go underneath the water, you see this larger piece of the iceberg that represents things that are more unconscious. So feelings, sensations, emotions. And for some of us, some of this is more conscious than others, just depending upon where we are in our journey and how we're uniquely wired. But at the very, very bottom of the iceberg is our nervous system. So it's literally like the foundation, the root of everything above it. And so yeah, when I talk to people about their nervous system, I always say it's like, think of it as your personal command and control center. So kind of like how
Nice.
on the Titanic, when they were about to hit the iceberg, right? They had a captain that was kind of like leading the ship. Same thing. It's your nervous system that's leading your proverbial ship in any given moment, but 95% or more of what's happening there is unconscious, meaning we don't necessarily always have conscious awareness. However, the beautiful thing about working with our nervous system is that we can create a lot of conscious intentionality with how we start to learn the nuances of our own unique nervous system, because my system is different than your system and your system is different than those listening, and we're all unique. So I believe that one of the best skills that we can be teaching everyone on this planet is how to get more in tune with what's happening in my nervous system in any given moment. How can I start to identify what state I'm in or where I'm going? And then how can I make decisions throughout my days that really align with that?
Oh my goodness. I love the description of like your nervous system as like the command control, that this is where everything is. And I keep thinking about, yeah, like a lot of, my clients that I work with or just individuals that are out there that are in these like nonprofit settings that are in spaces where you are continuously, and especially in the world that we're in right now, okay, I'm going to say something that I think is a little maybe different, unique perspective, but I actually don't necessarily think that the amount of things and troubles that are going on in our world right now are any different than any other decade or hundreds of years before. It's just that we have such exposure through technology that we now know everything going on in every different world. Well, depending on what the media shares to share with us, but we have access to so much. So now we have, social impact change makers that are in different intersections, involved in different types of things, whether it's like mental health, human trafficking, sex trafficking, whether it's like poverty, whether it's like racial injustice, whatever it is, right? And all of those things are intertwined with each other as well. And now it's not just a what's going on in my neighborhood and community, it's what's going on the other side of the world. And I now should care about that. And I should care about every single thing. And when somebody else doesn't care about it, then that brings up a lot of emotions for me as well. Like, why don't they care the way I care? And there is just, it is 24/7, right? So, how does somebody who is like, this is their world, this is their purpose, they work in this, they do this, how do they actually embody a lot of what you're talking about with the nervous system work you've done? And, I know you've done a lot of that somatic healing, which is like really diving into that intergenerational and just seeing the patterns that happen in our families and how we carry them with us. And what I always say is that people who are attracted to nonprofit world, it's like you're also to some degree have a savior complex because there's things within you that you saw in your environment that now you feel like if I don't save the day, if all of this weight of the shoulders is not on me, then I'm doing something wrong. So it's kind of like taking every core belief that you had, like, as a figure skater, right? Like, I'm not good enough, I'm not doing it all, if I'm not 100% saving the world and I'm not saving enough of the world, like, all of these things. How does someone like that actually take on what you're talking about and pause for a moment to being like, "Maybe it's not all on me to solve every single problem. Maybe it's not all on me." And even just being able to say that and not feel selfish about saying that.
Mhm. Yeah. I love that last part. Say it, but not feel selfish or not feel guilty.
Yes.
I have clients that will like, "Hey, I wanna feel this way without the guilt," or, "I wanna be able to do this without the guilt," because I'm noticing that there's still a lot of guilt and weight here, so I love that you named that, and I just also wanna double click on what you shared, like, our brains and bodies are in so many ways not designed for the modern world we live in terms of the amount of sensory stimulation
Overload.
our nervous systems have to process. Like, I mean, even just visually when we're scrolling, that takes so much for our ocular nerve to process and then communicate to our nervous system. And because our nervous system in any single microsecond is coding things as safe, a potential threat, or a real threat, it's like we're always scanning our environment for danger. That's how our brains and bodies are wired. So when we're constantly, to your point, 24/7 getting danger cues through all these
Yeah.
injustices all over the world, especially in places like you said that feel so far away, where we feel like we don't have maybe direct control over, or at least our nervous system
Right.
doesn't feel like it has direct control
Yeah,
over
like
it.
we're helpless, we can't make a change or just whatever's going on with the political sphere, right? Like, there's leaders that you may feel aligned to certain things, but then they have their actions that they're taking is so far from your belief around
Yeah.
humanity, and it's like you feel so helpless and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my recommendation as far as the solution goes is doing the inner work. And one of those things specifically, just to get a little more specific with it, is to develop the skill because all of this is a skill. Just like if we were to go to the gym and decide I want to run a marathon, most of us would not just decide that and go run a marathon the next day. We would have to train for it. We would have to build certain muscles. I know for me, I would definitely need to build the cardiovascular
Yeah.
stamina to do that, right? Like, and we're all starting from a little bit of a different place based on genetics, our environment, how our body currently is operating. So this is no different. So I really encourage those that are listening is to think of this in the same way that you would that or the same way when you were learning how to drive a car for the first time. It's like it takes practice, it takes time, it takes patience.
Yeah, it's a
So
muscle.
learning
Some
yeah, building the muscle memory. And so one of the skills in particular that I love to talk about and help train and teach people to build is what we call somatic discernment or what I like to call somatic discernment. Somatic is just a fancy scientific word for body. So it essentially means like how can I attune to what's happening in my system in more of a felt sense way. So not just cognitively and intellectually, that's just one piece of the puzzle that's only about 20% at best. What we know from the latest science is that 80% of what's happening in our nervous system is a function of information that's being fed from our body to our brain and only 20% from our brain to our body. So I share
Wow.
that just to kind of illuminate the fact that our body is a really important, often missing link in any sort of change and transformation process, whether that's on an individual level or on a collective level. So, somatic meaning body, and then discernment meaning the ability to discern, like in any given moment, what do I need? What does the situation need? And then being able to use that really intuitive power skill to then make a decision or take an action or maybe not take an action. I know for a lot of social impact folks, it's like they're always in action mode and doing mode. And like you said, it's kind of sometimes that savior complex comes in. Sometimes what our nervous system needs most is to pause, is to take a break, to take space. So when we develop this skill of somatic discernment, in any given moment, we can kind of assess, and it's just not about perfection. This is just about like living our life in a way that really honors, again, what's happening in our nervous system. In any given moment, do I personally need to use a particular tool that's going to really support me going into this high stakes conversation to kind of build that nervous system capacity so that my system has enough resource to move through that situation or move through that conversation or that experience? Or maybe, do I have enough capacity already to be with the discomfort that's arising inside of me? So, to your earlier point with like reaching for medicine right away, a lot of us, just because of the society we were kind of grown up in, we're kind of programmed to, again, if there's a symptom that feels unpleasant or uncomfortable, we want to squash it. We want to get rid of it. We want to ignore it or quiet it. But oftentimes, as I shared earlier, it's like that's information. So when
Yeah.
discomfort arises or when something doesn't feel pleasant, can we sit with it? Can we get curious about what is this
Mhm.
trying to show me? What
Yeah.
opportunities or hidden blessings even might be behind this that I'm not aware of right now? And so, yeah, it's about developing that like really that ninja skill of being able to really discern, what does this moment call for?
Hi, so I'm pausing the episode for a quick moment and for a quick favor. If you haven't already, if you could just click subscribe, leave a review wherever you're listening to this episode, it would be really helpful. The only way we can know to make sure that we provide the right type of podcast episodes, the right type of guests, and to make sure that we're delivering the type of content that you actually want to hear, it's through your reviews and through your support. Thanks. And now back to the episode. As you're talking about this, the way that I feel like I can relate it back to like mission driven work and just as founders and everything is that what you're essentially saying is like the same idea as what advocates talk about with like doing systemic change. So it's like you're out there trying to create systemic change. You're trying to, shift the way that the culture, society is thinking about certain really critical topics, human challenges, all of that. And so like, you know how to do that. Like, you know how to be able to like help people really get back to the root cause of like what this is. And so what I'm hearing really is like doing the exact same thing, but for you internally. And so it's like, if you really want to see that shift, if you want to see that behavioral shift, if you want to see that different, like, your example of running the marathon, what does that mean in terms of like even your core beliefs and being able to believe that you're able to run that marathon, right? And like that comes from, what have you been fed that you're allowed to, or you should, or you shouldn't, right? Like I'm someone where I just don't like running. So I've always said this, like, even if there's a bear or a tiger running after me, I'll just let them eat me because whatever, it's fine. Like I just don't care to run that much. But that's a belief. That belief came from somewhere that I'm not capable of doing that, right? I've accepted that belief. I'm not allowing it to necessarily like negate me in other ways. But I think it comes down to like, how does that nervous system, how does that like that somatic stuff also just like really understanding how your body is holding on to generations of challenges, right? Whether it's money challenges, whether it's, this repetitive cycle of things that you're just constantly in. It's like, where is that being fed from? And that is all like, I think they say like it's like 7 generations of your DNA is like in your nervous system. So if you go back 7 generations to find out like what was happening politically, what was happening socioeconomically, what was happening in like your ancestors' area of life, right? Like, and if you think 7 generations is like what, almost like, is it like 150 years or like 200 years, maybe 150 years? Something like that. So if you think
Yeah.
about like
Yeah.
what was happening, right? And it's like so much of that. And I know you've done a lot of that healing for yourself of like being able to come into this space and this is something I want to say is like having worked with you where for me to build my own business, right? And like we've done a lot of work on just understanding what those mindset blocks are as well as the nervous system that's rooted in it. Like I mean, there's been such a mass I mean, I burned my whole business down and brought it back to life in a different way, and the way that I was able to carry and I think that's something really critical is that what you're talking about is that it doesn't mean that by healing this that you're not going to face adversities. It doesn't mean that you're not going to face like challenges. It just means that you're going to have the tools to be able to manage it so you're not on this like wild roller coaster ride and everyone around you is also like, "Whoa, how do I do this?" And I think that really exists in when everyone is just shouting and screaming on LinkedIn and social media about their perspectives and this perspective, and you feel like, well, I need to have a perspective. And it's just like, no, maybe it's okay to just chill and walk this one out. Like, maybe it's okay to not have an opinion. Maybe it's okay to not know everything.
Yes, Pyle. Yes. And that right there requires a certain level of safety and capacity in our nervous system to be able to admit one to ourselves and then two, to be able to then show up in a way where we're saying, "Hey, I can't be an expert in everything." Like to me that's just
Yeah.
logically unrealistic
Yeah.
that anyone human would be able to be an expert in all of it. So, yeah, it's for any person to try to hold
Yeah.
some individual or even group accountable to know it all for all things just doesn't make sense. That's why we have variety in humans, and that's why we're so beautifully diverse is that, like, we all get to kind of pick and choose where we feel like our purpose and time and energy is best spent.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's so much more that we could talk about and go on about, and I feel like I need to bring you back for, like, a whole other series just to talk about, like, not just, the nervous system and how that helps regulate it, but also just taking it to that next level of what it means with the work that's happening in the world around us and how we, like, see each other, have more compassion for each other in that space. But what I do wanna ask you as we, wrap up is what is one thing that as you are continuing to grow in your own self and you're kind of entering a new chapter yourself with becoming a mom soon, and what is something that is a perspective that you're kind of working through now that you're hoping to reframe yourself or reframe for your community?
Yeah, I love that question, Pile. Yeah, a couple things that come to mind, especially like to your point as I prepare for motherhood and just so much unknown around the birth process and, like literally delivering this human into the world and then navigating this giant hormonal swing I know my body will be moving through. And then just these early phases of, yeah, raising a tiny human. And so I think one perspective I'm really trying to continue to work on, I wouldn't say it's like a new thing. It's just more of a deeper, like going to the next level of it to what we were just talking about, like being able to say, I don't know, and be comfortable not having all the answers. I think growing up as someone that really excelled academically, and again, having my grandma who was so focused on grades and excelling in these activities and sports we were doing that like my nervous system didn't feel safe and didn't feel comfortable not knowing the answers or not like being the best
Yeah.
at things. So I think really wanting to approach this next chapter from that place of not trying to be the best, not trying to have all the answers. And really, I've gotten a lot better at this. And this is still something I'm working on is like just like asking for help, just being okay, asking
Yeah.
for support and not feeling like I need to be that superwoman that I think a lot of times has birthed out of like the boss babe culture of like do it all and be able to excel on all fronts at the same time all the time, which again is just
Yeah.
so unrealistic, especially from a nervous system perspective. So for me, it's like just giving myself a lot of grace and space to do less and allow that less to be more and not just say it from this like kitschy, oh, that sounds great perspective, but like really fully embody it in terms of how I'm
Yeah.
showing up.
I love that so much, and I just know that you're gonna be so intentional with even, your own child and just I think that, as you're working through and you continue to work through that, like, what is those intergenerational things that you don't want to bring into the next generation? And so it's like by you being a cycle breaker, by working on this stuff, right? Like you're actually setting up that next generation with a set of tools that allows them to create and be different and something that they don't have to, like, take on, and, they'll have their own set of challenges, but it's like it's also just recognizing that it's okay, and I think one of the most difficult parts is, like, people feel like it's what you're talking about is, like, going through the nervous system and the functional part of things, it's like it's foreign and our bodies reject things that are foreign, and then when you're different, you feel isolated, and as humans, we're supposed to be a part of, like, this group think. So there's so many things that you have to overcome to be able to get to the other side, and having that perseverance, and I know you do such a phenomenal job teaching that in your neurosomatic program and being able to help people, help founders, entrepreneurs, everyone. Like, I think it's so funny and interesting that a lot of people who have chronic illnesses end up becoming entrepreneurs because corporate doesn't really give them that function and support, which is hilarious because being an entrepreneur isn't exactly the most stressless thing that someone with autoimmune should have. But your tools that you teach and that you really help people ingrain, not only does it like help excel their work forward, but it helps them get more centered. So I just want to thank you for what you have provided me personally, but also what you have provided for all the listeners to hear that, the work that you're doing, everything you're doing is amazing and the cause is fantastic. But if you continue to sacrifice yourself in it, you're only going to ultimately end up in a place of like resentment, burnout, and it's going to be the opposite of what you really are wanting to have. And through your nervous system healing, you actually have more energy to be able to give to your cause, and I think people think slowing down means like you're not doing enough, but actually slowing down internally allows you to have more impact. So I just want to thank you so much for all the things that you've brought to this table and for what all the listeners are hearing. And, again, like your program is just phenomenal. It's like there's a lot of integrity in there. There's so much. I mean, it's been accredited, which has been phenomenal. So it's like, it's not just something that you're like, let me just put this together. It's like, no, this is like very intentionally done. And you live and practice it. People, they don't necessarily practice what they preach, but you live it daily. And I see that all the time. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Pyle. Oh my gosh, that means so much to me. And you mean so much to me. And I'm just, again, so honored to be here today. And yeah, just so in awe of everything you are building and all the impact you are having on this community. And just, yeah, for those of you listening, just really grateful to have you here. And I know time is our most precious resource. And so for those of you listening, it definitely isn't lost on me that you're choosing to spend time with me and with us today. So yeah, thank you again, Pyle.
I really hope that you enjoy this episode, and I just have one favor to ask you. If you could just make sure to hit that subscribe button, leave a rating and review, it's going to help us tremendously to make sure that we reach as many people as possible that you think should be listening to our episodes. I'll see you next week for another episode, and thank you so much for leaving that one review, that one subscription, and sharing this with your friends.